This video is brought to you by the Abbey Community School Society. Hello and welcome to Game Design with Laszlo. I'm Laszlo. In this class, I'm hoping to teach you guys how to do some simple game design using an online platform called Scratch. We'll be using Scratch because it's very accessible to anybody. If you have a computer or Mac or tablet or anything that has a browser on it, you should be able to run Scratch. So let's get started. As you can see, I've opened my Google Chrome browser. You can use Microsoft Edge or Safari or Mozilla Firefox or any browser really. Once you've got your browser open, navigate to a website called scratch.mit.edu. Once you're there, you will need to either join Scratch if you don't have an account, or if you do have an account, click sign in. I'm going to click sign in and sign in. Once you're signed in, you want to click the create button, and that should bring up the Game Design Studio. Okay. So what do we have here? We have a screen with some tabs. On the top right corner here, this is our game that will be running. This is where we get to test our things that we put together. On the bottom right corner here, we have our resources tab. So these will be our sprites. Think of them kind of like our objects, the things that interact with each other and do everything in the game. On the far right hand side here, we have a vertical tab that contains our backgrounds or rooms or backdrops. Then in the middle here, we have our coding area. This is where we can drag all these symbols. So Scratch is a drag and drop symbol-based language. So that means you can just click on these symbols or block-based language, and you can drag them into this area just like that. And then your character will perform this action when the code requests him to. There's a bunch of code here. We'll go over this as we start making our game. Then we have costumes. Costumes is where you can draw things. And finally, we have sounds. This is where we can load our custom sounds or record our voice or so on. So these are the three elements that we need to build our game. So let's start. First thing I'm going to do is give my game a title. I'm just going to call it Holiday Game. So let's talk about the game we're going to build. Over here, we have a cat. I'm going to be replacing this cat, but for the sake of explanation, I'll keep him. My game is going to have a character, which I can control to move left and right using the left and right arrow keys. So when I press those keys, the character moves left and right. And from the sky, I'll have something dropping. So either presents or not obstacles, things you want to collect. So coins, presents, food, whatever. It depends on the theme of your game. In my game, it's going to be presents. I will try and catch those things. If I catch them, I gain some points. If I drop them, then I dropped one. And there'll be a counter that kind of keeps track of how many items you've dropped. And if you drop too many items, it's going to be game over. As this is all happening, the game will obviously be speeding up. There'll be different stages. Each stage will be a little bit faster. And then when you do catch present, your score will go up by 1. So that's the game in a nutshell. Quite a few little things happening there. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is click on this garbage bin to delete the cat because I don't want to use the cat. And then let me just hide my character here. I want to create some new characters. So I'm going to hover down here and go up to the paint. That allows me to paint my own character. So this is a painting program now. We've got selection tool, point select tool. Actually, let's change this. I want to click convert to bitmap. I prefer to draw in bitmap. There we go. When you click bitmap, it does change the tools a little bit. So we got a brush tool, line tool, circle tool, rectangle tool, a text tool, eraser tool, fill tool, and a select tool. Okay, so now I'm going to be drawing my Santa Claus. Once I draw the first image of the Santa Claus, I'll speed up the video. I'll draw the Santa Claus, and I'll slow it down a little bit to explain what the next step is. Okay. Enjoy my drawing. All right, so I've drawn my Santa. Let's leave this. So this is called costume 1. That's okay. I want to be able to somehow kind of animate him so that he actually moves. One way we can do that is if we go up here to the left-hand side where his costume 1 is and we right-click on it, we can click duplicate. So now I've got 2 of these images. And I'm going to go to the second one and change him just a tiny bit so that it looks like he's walking. So I'm just going to have 2 images. I'm going to swap between the 2 images as I play the game. And I'm just going to kind of shift his legs a little bit so that it looks like he's walking. Okay, so it's not the greatest. I'm not even sure if it looks like a walk, but at least I've got two different images that I can switch between, and that was my goal. I wanted to be able to show you guys how to do some animations in this code. So I've drawn my Santa. I'm going to move on and create a new sprite. So I'm going to go down here, click on paint, and the next one is I need to draw some presents. So I'm going to call this one presents, just like that. And for this one, we're going to draw a bunch of presents. Each one's going to have its own costume, so maybe 3, 4, or 5 different presents. The more you draw, the more exciting the game will be. Oh, and just one tip. So if you need to change the color of your character, you can always go up to the fill tool here, click this. This is your color tool, so you can choose a color, saturation, and brightness. And also, there's another tool called the eye picker tool. So if you ever need to pick a color from the canvas that's already on the canvas, you can click the color picker tool, click it, and then it just sets it to that color. So it's a good way to be able to use the same color multiple times. Okay, anyways, I'm going to be drawing the presents now and fast forwarding the video. Okay, so I've drawn the presents as well. I've stuck with 3. You can draw as many as you'd like. One thing to note about the presents, I'm just going to zoom out and show you this. As I click through the presents, you'll notice that they're not all in the same position, so we need to fix that. The way we can fix that is we can use this selection tool here. Select. So if I go up to the top one, I'm going to try and put this in the very middle. If I do that, I should be able to just drag it in the very middle, just like that. Let's go to this one. Also use the selection tool, select it, kind of drag it in the very middle. Perfect. And then the third one, select it and just make sure it's also in the middle. So once all 3 presents are in the middle, it'll just be much better when we actually use them in the game. So there we go. I've got my presents. I've got my Santa. I just need one more thing, which is the ground. So I'm going to go down to the bottom right here, click on new paint layer. This will be my ground. So let's name it ground. There we go. And I'm going to make sure I convert to bitmap just like last time. And let's draw something. So okay, so that's done too. So we've created our Santa, presents, and our ground. So we've actually got all the sprites that we need to make this game work. So we can just switch over to code for now. And first thing I'll notice is that this is our game on the top right corner. I need to put a background in there so I can actually see all this. There's a lot of white here. The snow is white. My Santa's got some white on it. And the background's white, so that's too much white. It's hard to see things. So I'm going to click on this backdrop. And I can go down here, choose a backdrop, and I'm actually going to do the search, choose a backdrop, and this might take a couple of seconds for you guys to load. I'm going to choose winter. I like the winter backdrop, and there we go. So now we got a background, and I'm just gonna fix it a little bit. So let's go to the backdrop. You can use the select tool. I think, yeah, you can select some items and you can maybe drag them closer. So I just want to bring the Christmas trees in a little bit closer. That's okay. And that's good. So I've got my backdrop. I've got my ground. So let's fix the ground. So I'm going to click on the ground and I can reposition it. So anything that you see in this window in the top right, you can actually reposition. So I've repositioned my ground to cover the edges of my screen. I'm trying my best to do so. I'm going to bring my Santa, so let's select Santa and bring him down. Now my Santa's huge, way bigger than I need him to be, so let's maybe resize him. So there's a size setting here. Let's try 25%. It might be a little bit too small. Let's try 35%. That's better. So I want my Santa like that. And the presents as well. The presents are way too big, so I'm going to click with my presents and change their size. So let's change the size to maybe 50%. Maybe a little bit smaller. Let's go 35% once again. Good. So there we go. So I like these. Everything is good size right now. Now we just need to get everything to start moving. So how do you code in Scratch? Well, let's start with the Santa. I think he'll be the easiest one to code. Let's do some trials first. So trials to show you guys how the system works. So let's say I want my Santa to move left and right. How could I do that? So if I go to events, you'll see that events are things that happen and you can respond to them. So for example, there's an event here. So all I'm doing is I'm left click and drag. So when space key is pressed, do something. So I don't want it to be the space key. I want it to be the right arrow. So when the right arrow is pressed, I want my Santa to move right. So how do I do that? I go to motion. Move 10 steps. Sure, that might work, but I don't know what that means, like what direction I'm moving. I want it to be this one, change X. So X is your horizontal position. This is coming to like a little bit of graphing math. You've got your X and Y. X is horizontal motion, Y is vertical motion. So if I'm moving to the right, I can say change X by 10. Sure, let's test it out. So now if I press my right key, my Santa actually moves. Perfect. Now how do I move to the left? Well, I could do the same thing. I can go events, drag another one of these out here, change the space to be left arrow, go to motion and select change X by. If you want to move to the left, you have to not add 10, but subtract 10. So I'm going to do -10. And now when I play it, there we go. My Santa can go both directions. Perfect. So this is just a very simple intro for you guys. This is not actually the code we're going to use in the game. So now that we've seen that that works, let's grab these and delete them. So to delete something, you can click, drag, and drop it in this box here. So I've gotten rid of these. So, okay, how are we going to make this work? Well, I always like to start with kind of like my variables. So let's click on variables. And let's make some variables. I did mention when I was talking about the initial game design that we were going to have some scores. So let's make a variable. You can click the make a variable button and type score. And this is something that applies to all sprites. Okay. I also want to make another variable. I want to make a variable that kind of counts how many drops I'm allowed to make. So drop counts as a missed present. So I didn't catch the present. So drops allowed. So this will apply to all sprites as well. Another one I want is how fast does my Santa move? So I want to be able to control that with a variable. So I'm going to make another variable and call this one move speed. And one last one, I can actually take this one that's called my variable, right click on it and rename it and call this one game speed. So I did mention that the game is going to speed up over time, so that's why I'm making this one. So let's get started with the hero. So the hero is going to do a few things. Let's do the left and right motion first. This symbol here, this is the one when you click this flag, it starts the game. So when I click that, this will go. In here, I'm going to grab a loop. A loop is something that repeats the code over and over and over. But I want to do this one, repeat until. So the reason I'm using this one is because I want to pause the game. So once the player loses, they should lose control of the character. They shouldn't be able to keep controlling their character. So that's why I'm using this one. And there must be a condition in here that stops this. So the condition is going to be an operator. And I'm going to choose this one here. This is the less than operator. And I'm going to say when my variables, when my drops allowed has become less than 0. So that means I've run out of drops. When my drops allowed is less than 0, that means I used up my very last drop and I'm out of drops. Then this should exit, and that's exactly what it does. Now, if I do get in here, then I need to do some more things. So I'm going to use a if-then conditional. So this one, what it does is it checks to see if this condition is true. If it's true, then it runs the code blocks that are in here. So what I'm trying to see is if I'm pressing left key. So I can go to sensing. Let's find it. Here we go. This is key pressed. So I can drop this into that box. Just like that. And the first key I want to check for is my left key. So if the left key is being pressed, then what should my character do? Well, let's go to motion. And we have this thing called change X. So we're going to be changing our horizontal position. And we need to change it by a value. Now, what value do you want to change it by? Well, it's going to be move speed. But I said that as the game goes on, it speeds up. So how can we do that? Well, we can use an operator, mathematical operator, and do a little bit of multiplication. So I'm going to use this one here. This multiplies two variables together. Drop it into this box. Go back to my variables, and I'm going to be multiplying my move speed by my game speed. So if my game speed is 1 and my move speed is 10, then I move at 10. But if my game speed becomes 1.5 because it's been a little while, then I'm all of a sudden moving at 15 speed, which is perfect because I want my character to move faster as things drop faster. One more thing, this is moving left, but move speed is probably going to be a positive number. So how do we do that? Well, we can multiply one more time. So I'm going to grab one more of these multiplying boxes, drop it in here. I'm going to drop this one back in here. And in the middle here, I'm just going to put -1. So if I multiply the whole thing by -1, then this becomes a negative value. I want to do the exact same thing going on the right direction, so I can actually repeat all these steps. So back to control, select the if-then statement, drop it in here, go to sensing. I'm going to be checking for a key, so this key here, right key. So this time it's going to be a right condition. How do you move to the right? We're going to be changing our X position again, so change X by some number. Let's go to operators, throw in the multiplier again. And this time we don't have to multiply by +1 because by default things will be positive. And we can throw our move speed and our game speed in here. So that should take care of our movement right away. Another thing about our Santa is that our Santa is animated. He has some sprites. So I can actually demonstrate that if I go to costumes, he's got 2 images. But we have to somehow switch between the images when we move. So I'm going to create some blocks to do that as well. So let's go to events. I'm going to do one for each direction, I think. Let's use, so when this button is clicked, once again, same thing. I'm going to be doing the repeat until. So it's very similar to what's above. But there's a tiny difference, which I'll explain in a little bit. We're going to be using, once again, the drops allowed is less than, so it's this one. So if drops allowed is less than 0, then we exit this loop, so then we don't move anymore. And then we're going to be checking. So control and see if the key is pressed. So if it's probably all the same. So you'll notice that sometimes this is the difference between a typed language where you can actually type your code or one where you use symbols. Sometimes when you use symbols, you have to do a lot more to achieve some things. So let's go left arrow. So when the left arrow is pressed, I want my character to do something. So what is that? This is all about the sprite. So it's about the looks of the character. I want to go to the next costume, but I want to change my direction. So let's go to direction. I want to point in direction 90. That's just one direction. Let me just demonstrate what I mean by direction is here. You can change the direction of a character. So if I start doing this, he's going to rotate. Now I don't want him to do that. And there's actually a cool feature here. If you click this middle button, left, right, that means that when I go from one to the other, he just changes which way he looks. So it looks like right now, if I have a negative number, he'll be looking to the right. If I have a positive number, he'll look to the left. So that's good for me because this is a positive number. He's going to look to the left. That works. I need to repeat all this for the right side. So I can actually click the whole thing. Right click, duplicate. So it makes a copy of it. I'm going to throw it over here. And I'm just going to change everything. So right, when the right arrow is pressed, I'm going to point in the negative 90 direction, and that should flip in the other direction. Now, the problem with this is that this will happen extremely fast. All these loops happen extremely fast. And if you don't control them, then what's going to happen is the sprite's going to blink really, really fast. So you need to put in one more control, which is a wait. So by putting this wait in, we can control the speed of the animation. We need to add it to both of these. And I think waiting for something very small, like 0.1 seconds, so 1/10 of a second, is enough time to make this character blink just long enough to make it look good. Okay, so that's it. So the hero is done. Let's see if it works. So if I click play here. Perfect. It is moving, or he's animated when I press the key. The only thing is he's not actually moving to the left or right. He's only changing direction and animating. And that's most likely due to our move speed and our game speed being 0. And those are not set yet, so we're not actually changing our position. But let's move on. Let's move on to the presents. So what is the code for the presents? Well, the presents have to basically randomly spawn up here in the sky somewhere. And then as soon as they spawn, they need to start dropping down. And if they hit the hero, then we get a point. If they hit the ground, then we lose a drops allowed. So drop allowed gets smaller by 1. So how do we do that? Well, this one's a little bit easier than the hero. We're going to start by, once again, same event. No, not the same event, sorry. This time we're going to start when let me just find it. Oh, here. Sorry, so it was under control. So when I start as a clone, what does that mean? That means when these presents are obviously going to be cloned. We're going to have a lot of these presents in the game, and we're going to be cloning them. So when they get cloned, they'll start doing all these things. So first thing is they need to pick a spot on the horizontal up at the top. So let's do that. So if I go to motion, I can go to XY. There we go. Drop this in. For my Y, I think if we click on this present and drag it up to the top, you can kind of see its values over here. The highest I can drag it is about 184, maybe a little bit higher. Let's see. No, 184 is the highest. So in the Y value, that's the vertical, I'm going to type 184. So when one of these things gets spawned, he jumps up there in the Y position. In the X position, we want him to be somewhere along this position. So what are our choices? I'm looking at this number here on this X number. So on the left-hand side, I can go as far, maybe let's go as far as this, so 223. And on the right-hand side, 223 on both sides. Let's go to operators. And there's this one that's called a pick a random number. So I'm going to drop that into the X component of this. And the numbers that I'm going to pick from are negative 223 to positive 223. Okay, so whenever we clone one of these presents, it's going to jump up to the top and randomly pick a position along the top of the screen. And also, once it is cloned, I want it to appear. Now, it's appeared right now, but later on I think we're going to make it disappear. So let's use the show. Okay, so it shows. And now we need to make it drop. So how do we do that? So we're going to go to events. Sorry, not events, to control. And we're going to do forever. So forever is a loop that does the code over and over and over. This arrow represents that once the code gets to the bottom, it jumps back to the top, and it just does this code over and over and over until this object no longer exists. And now we need to do some tests to see what to do with this. So I'm going to drop an if-then statement in here. Go to sensing, and I'm going to be using the touching one. So touching is when some object touches some other object. So when this object is touching the sprite 1. Let's rename our Santa. So let's go back to our Santa. Just make sure that he's named Santa, or whatever your hero's named. Let's go back to the present. So, and you can see when I change the name of this, it also changed the name of this. So if I'm touching the Santa, then what do? Well, I'm going to change my score by, oh, sorry, that's variables. So variables, let's change our score by 1. That means I'm just going to increase my score by 1. So if my score is 1, now it's going to be 2. If it's 2, it's going to be 3, and so on. And I'm also going to play a sound. So are there any sounds on this present that I can play? Let's go to sounds, pop sound. Perfect. I like that sound. So when you pick up the present, it's going to play that sound. So I can go to sound. I can start a sound, put that in here, and pop. And the last thing I need to do is, once the present has touched the Santa, I need to destroy or remove the present from the game. So to do that, I can go down to control and delete this clone. So when the present touches the Santa, I gain a point, I play a sound, and I destroy or remove the present from the game. Let's move on. So what about if it touches the ground? So how do we do that? Well, we can put another if statement in here. Down here, it's going to be very similar. So if it's touching the ground, then I'm going to be changing a variable. So this time I'm not giving you any points. Instead, I'm going to change drops allowed, but I'm going to decrease it by 1. So -1. And I'm also going to play the pop sound. So play sound, start sound, pop. And then let's go to control, delete this clone. Perfect. So if we touch Santa, we gain a point. If we touch the ground, we lose a drop. And we play the sound and destroy the this object. What's the last thing? So last thing is that this character needs to be moving down at all times. So to make the present be dropping at all times, we need to be changing its Y position. So you can change Y. You can drop this at the very bottom here, or maybe at the top. Let's do it at the top. It makes more sense. So change Y by, and we're going to be changing it by -10. Negative is moving downwards in mathematics. And we're going to be multiplying it. So just like last time, let's grab this one. Let's actually put the -10 in here. And then multiply it by game speed. There. So once again, as the game speeds up, this -10 is going to be multiplied by 1, then 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and so on. So all of a sudden, this is becoming a bigger and bigger speed of falling. There we go. Finally, one last thing. We did draw 3 presents, or I drew 3 presents. So I want to make sure I change the sprite of the present to one of these. So to do that, I can go to looks and I can pick a set. How would we change the costume? Here we go. Switch costume to. Let's do that. And then give a choice of costume 1, 2, 3. I don't want one of those. I want a costume. Oh, sorry, that's probably not what I want. Instead, I probably want to do a random number generator. So pick a number between 1 and 3. I think that should work because if I go back here, there's a 1 here, a 2 here, and a 3 here. So I think that represents numbers. So if I can switch to those numbers. So I'll randomly switch to one of these costumes. There we go. The present should now spawn, fall, and do all these collision checks and change the sprite and so on. So let's move. And one last thing, we should probably disable the present so it's not visible. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be cloning this object and spawning it up here. So let's just actually put it up here and make it invisible. Finally, let's move on to the ground. This is our last part of the code. So we're going to make the ground control the whole game. It'll be in charge of doing everything. So let's do music first. I can go to sounds. I don't need this pop sound, so let's delete the pop sound. I need to add some sound effects. I want 2 sound effects. I want some music. So I'm actually going to do the music by doing an upload. So I can do upload sound. In my downloads folder, I have a song called Jingle Bells Keyboard. If you guys are in the Google Classroom or actually in the YouTube video too, I'll put a link up to where to download this. Yeah, it's just some Christmas music. Perfect. And I also want to add some sound effects. So let's choose a sound effect for when it's game over. Let's see, sports maybe. Let's do goal cheer. I want to, when it's game over, let's have a happy cheer instead of a game over. So you can also record your own sounds if you choose to. There's a record button here. You can, speak into your mic and say game over if you want to. I'm going with the goal cheer. So I've got my 2 sounds. Let's rename this one to music. There we go. Let's go back to the code. So the first thing I want to do is play some music when the game starts. So same thing again, events. This is the game start event. And as long as the game runs, I want to play music. So I'm going to be using the forever symbol. And I'm going to go to sound. And then play sound until done. I like that one. That's good for music. And switch it over to music. So let's see. Does this work so far? Yeah. So as soon as I click the play button or go button, the music starts playing. And now let's figure out how to drop presents and how to speed up the game. It's probably going to be the same event. So when this is clicked, so I need one of these. We need to set up our variables. So let's go to variables and let's set some variables. 1, 2, 3, and 4. First variable we want to set when we start the game, let's set our score to 0. Good. Let's set our move speed to be, I think let's try 15. Let's set our drops allowed to be 10. So we're going to give the player 10 drops to start the game. So that means they can miss the present 10 times before it's game over. And then our game speed, we're going to set to 1. This is how you set up variables in Scratch. Next, we're going to do a loop just like last time. And we're going to be repeating until. So we're going to repeat until. You guys have seen this already. Until this one. So until our drops allowed has become less than 0. So when you've dropped too many presents, this is going to exit and it's going to do some game over things. We can actually do those game over things now. So what should happen when you've lost? Well, we should probably stop the music. So stop all sounds. And we're going to do the goal cheer. So let's start the sound goal cheer. And we're just going to display a game over, or game over message. So you can do that under looks. And you can do a think. Think is pretty cool. It draws like a think bubble and then displays what you typed in. So game over. So we're just going to say game over. It's probably going to pop up somewhere in the corner. I'm just going to say game over. So what about inside this loop? So how do we do this? Well, let's do a repeat number loop. So this kind of loop will do something as many times as you want. So I think between each stage, so this game's going to have stages, and each stage is going to speed up a little bit. Between each stage, I'm going to be spawning about 20 presents. I'm going to say repeat 20 times. And next I need to check to see if I'm actually allowed to spawn a present. So I'm going to go use an if statement, and I need to do this check again, unfortunately. So how do I do that? I go operators. It's a lot of repetition sometimes, but that's how this works. Variables, drops allowed is less than 0. So, or sorry, this should be greater than 0. I did that incorrectly. So this is a little bit different than before. What I'm trying to do now is I only want to be spawning things or spawning presents and pausing the game or waiting if I'm actually allowed to spawn presents. So what am I doing? So I'm going to be waiting first. There's a wait symbol here. So wait. I don't want to spawn all the presents all at once. Instead, I want to be spawning them slowly. So I want to be waiting for a second between each present. So let's use this symbol here. This is the division symbol. And this is how you can use game speed when you're trying to use it with time. If I do this, what I'm doing is between every present, I'm going to wait 1 second. But I'm going to be dividing that 1 second by game speed. And once again, game speed is a value that starts at 1 and moves upwards. So in my first round, I have 1 divided by 1. 1 divided by 1 is 1. So I'm waiting for 1 second. But in my second round, my game speed has actually gone up to maybe 1.1. And then when I'm spawning, I'm only waiting 1 divided by 1.1, which will be a little bit less than 1 second, and so on. So once game speed is up to 2, now I'm only waiting 1/2 of a second, and so on. So it's just a cool way to speed up your game or lower the amount of time you wait between things. But if this is happening, then I want to be spawning or cloning, so I can use this one here. Create a clone of presents. So when this happens, the present will run all this code here. Let's go back to ground. Good, so I'm going to be repeating this 20 times per phase. Now let's move on. So I'm going to be doing an if-then statement down here underneath the repeat. So once I've done my repetition and I've spawned my boxes or my presents, then I need to check to see if my drops allowed is greater than 0. So this is kind of telling it that I'm allowed to do whatever's in here. What is this variable? Drops allowed. So if drops allowed is greater than 0, I can do everything that's in here. I'm going to be changing my drops allowed by 5. So what this means is I'm giving my first let's understand what's happening here. So this loop is the game stage, and we have many stages of the game. So everything that's inside this big repeat until loop is part of my stage, one stage. In that one stage, I want to spawn 20 presents. That's if I am allowed to spawn presents, because I still have some drops allowed. So that this first part is spawning the presents. The second part is going to be once I've done spawning all these presents, and if I'm still in the game's not over yet, then I need to go to the next stage. So I need to set up the next stage. So to set up the next stage, I'm going to give the player some more catches that they're allowed to, catch some more presents. This is kind of like you can save up your catches for when the game starts getting harder. And I need to change the game speed. So let's change game speed. this will increase our game speed. And we're only increasing it by a very small number, something like 0.1. I also want to speed up the music, so there's a cool thing you can do. You can change the pitch. So I'm going to change the pitch by, let's just say maybe 4. That's going to make it sound a little bit higher pitched, and that makes it seem like it's playing faster. And finally, I need to let the player know that they've gone into a new round. So I'm going to do a think for a couple of seconds. So maybe 2 seconds so they can gather their thoughts. I'm just going to say next round, just like that. And with that, I think the whole game is done. Let's test it out. If you press the play button. Yeah, you can see the presents are changing. My Santa's moving left and right. I'm hitting the ground. Let's just collect some of these. Next round, music sped up. You guys can hear the pitch changed. Let's see what happens when I don't catch. I have 7 drops allowed. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Game over. The music is still playing, so something is not working as intended. I think the music will just play. I'm okay with that. So anyways, that is the game. It's almost completely done. Let's just move these score things around. So I want to put the drops allowed in the top right corner. Score can be in the top left corner. Move speed I can hide. So to hide a variable, you can go to variables and just uncheck the little checkbox next to it. And with that, the game is done. You can make it full screen if you want. So here's my game full screen. I can play it. Let's just try one more time. For some reason, I wasn't able to control. Oh, there we go. Now I've got control. There you go. Hopefully it was that. Hope you guys have a good holidays and enjoy the game. Hope you learned lots. Maybe try and challenge yourself. Maybe instead of spawning presents all the time, maybe spawn some obstacles, which if you do catch them, your drops allowed drops by like 5 or something, and so on. So give it a try. Challenge yourself. Use this platform. It's very easy to use. Everything is on here. You don't have to use any other programs. So once again, happy holidays and have a good one. Thanks for watching.